Well, it began when I was asked to write a travel magazine, travel article about Philadelphia. The American Society of Travel Agents was having its annual convention in Philadelphia, which is a big deal for the city because usually it was in Bangkok or Vienna or some place that Philadelphians would consider more exotic. So I was given the opportunity to write about my hometown, and I found out quite a few things about it, including the fact that I had never been to one of its top French restaurants. And in the process of writing the piece and having finished it, they rewarded me with a meal at any place I wanted to go to. And Risa and I ended up going to De Cheminée, which is one of the top restaurants in the city. And there we met Fritz. And were charmed by him immediately. I'd always been a little scared of chefs, thinking that they were these imperious, temperamental, Hell's Kitchen types that you sometimes see on, or that you too often see on television these days. Fritz was very mellow, very funny, very generous with his information, and the seed was immediately planted that I wanted to write about him, but how to do that. And as it turned out, in a very short period of time, we were in a situation where Risa's business made her very busy. We couldn't cook together anymore. I had to do a lot more cooking in our home kitchen. I didn't know much about it. The men in my family had never really ever learned. That was our unfortunate tradition. And I thought it was high time that I learned to cook. So lo and behold, a notice came in the mail from the University of Pennsylvania. They had a graduate course or an extracurricular course in cooking taught by none other than Chef Fritz Blank in the restaurant kitchen of De Cheminée. So I signed up immediately, began taking notes and taking notes and taking notes, and that's how the book came into being. I just found him so fascinating, and the information that came from him was so interesting that I just kept going with it. It went from a very simple learn to cook project into a book. I would say that Fritz taught me about the love of food and the love of the traditions, the customs, all of the ethnic input that goes into food. It's quite an extraordinary area of study, I discovered. And it's an area of study that is expanding, is in the universities now. Many large universities have food studies programs, including University of Pennsylvania. So it opened that world to me. I had taken my own culinary background, so to speak, for granted. Suddenly I realized there were all sorts of traditions that fed into what I ate when I was growing up in Chester County, Pennsylvania. So Fritz opened that world to me. That was the main thing. And then he just showed me that someone like me in late midlife, you would say, could learn to cook and do a decent job of it. I could, just by watching him and being open to his suggestions, that I could make what had once seemed to me like very exotic and unattainable dishes. They turned out to be not all that difficult at all. And I'm hoping that something readers will get from this book is how accessible good cooking is. It is quite accessible. it's not a mystery. That there's a lot of fun to it. I used to be intimidated by going into kitchens. Now I love being there. To me, it's a creative place. It was that way for Fritz, and he showed me that it could be that way for me as well. Well, I would say my repertoire was very small before I met Fritz and before I took the step of really learning to cook. I made scrambled eggs. I made a fairly decent risotto. Risa and I did stir fries together, but anything beyond that was I was a little timid to attempt. Um, these days, I really like to do soup and stew. Oddly enough, that's what Fritz liked to do as well. He ran a French restaurant, but cooking for his staff, cooking for himself, going out to eat, he often liked more simple country fare, especially the dishes that came from his background, which was German. He learned to cook from his grandmother. Actually, when Fritz grew up, he spoke German with his grandmother. And when he first went to school, he had a German accent and had to become American fairly quickly. So he very much likes German food, Hungarian. I myself, because Risa's family is, her father's family is from Austria, I've learned to like Austrian dishes like goulash. That's one of my fallback favorites. I love to make an Austrian or Czech version of goulash. I love to make soups of all different kinds. I like something that's a nice big mess that you can make in a big pot or make in a slow cooker and have on hand for a number of days rather than making something for just one meal. So I would say that's my main favorite, other than we both love to make turkey for Thanksgiving and Christmas. We'll make quite a production of it and spend a day or two producing that, but that's quite unusual. And then after that, I like to make all the things that come out of having a turkey carcass. I love to make the soup stock from turkey, and then do things with it. It's fun to make use of every bit of the bird that you possibly can. Gee, that's very interesting to think about. If I were going to invite friends of Fritz, it would be very tempting to ask them to bring something, because they all like to cook and they all like to bring something. It was always fun to go to food events that Fritz was involved in, because everybody was an expert and everybody liked to pitch in. So it was a real collaboration. I was impressed by how somebody, even Julia Child, would see something that needed to be done and she would go off and do it, or tell somebody to do it, or whatever needed to be produced. If it were all up to me, I probably would pick a few of Fritz's favorite recipes. He loved to do rack of lamb. He did a lot of great things with potatoes. He loved to say, "I've never made a bad soup." I would probably do one of his soups. I do have a big stack of his recipes that he would hand out very generously in class. I might even do the first recipe he ever taught, which was cream of kohlrabi soup. The kohlrabi is a very odd-looking vegetable that I had not known much about it at all before that class, and Fritz produced just a fabulous soup. It was wonderfully tasty. So I might do that. I think I would want to do a number of his favorites. It would take a lot of preparation, and I would ask for a fair amount of assistance. But I think that's what my plan would be. Well, sadly, if I would love to have Julia Child. If we could call her back from whatever a level of culinary heaven she might be visiting at the time. I got to meet Julia through Fritz, and maybe in a while I'll read a little excerpt about her. She was very, very entertaining. Betty Fussell was a great friend of Fritz's, a cookbook writer, food historian. Certainly Jessica Harris, who is an expert on African cooking, has done remarkable cookbooks on what she calls the cooking of the African diaspora, the influence of Africa on the cooking of the United States, especially in the East Coast and the American South, but very much in Philadelphia too. There was a considerable African tradition in Philadelphia. Perhaps Jeffrey Steingarten of Vogue, who wrote a book called The Man Who Ate Everything. He could be counted on to eat everything and be a great raconteur. Harold McGee, a food scientist, wrote a book called The Curious Cook. Another food scientist, friend of Fritz, Shirley Corriher. She would be a great addition. They're all great raconteurs, and what happens when you get all these people together is they talk endlessly about food, and it never gets boring because they all have stories that you never heard before, including from the old days when Julia Child and others went to the south of France, when Alice Waters was going to Provence. These old stories give you a great sense of actually the traditions behind our current American cuisine. You know, Alice Waters' restaurant in Chez Panisse in Berkeley is celebrated as justly, but it has its roots in the south of France, and there are many, many stories connected with the people and the events that help create a restaurant like Chez Panisse. And all of these stories and all of this tradition floats around the table of an evening when these people get together. So it would be a wonderful occasion.